I was born in Puerto Rico. My mother's side of the family is Puerto Rican. And I know that we've been on the island at least since the mid-1800s. Puerto Rico was discovered by the Spanish. Obviously, the Taino Indians had been living there for millennia. But we were under Spanish rule from the late 1400s until 1898, when, as a result of the Spanish-American War, Puerto Rico was ceded to the United States. Puerto Ricans became U.S. citizens in 1917 as a result of the Jones Act. Although we're U.S. citizens, we're second-class U.S. citizens, meaning that we can't run for president, that while living on the island, we can't vote in federal elections. We were basically run by a series of American-appointed governors. And as a matter of fact, the three political parties in Puerto Rico basically are all aligned towards where they want the political status of Puerto Rico to go. There's obviously a lot of strong sentiment right now in favor of statehood because of the horrible economic crisis that we're in. We owe over $72 billion, and that's with a B, in bonds that were purchased in order to kind of keep the island rolling. Just about anybody who has a 401k has some Puerto Rican bonds, I can guarantee you. And the reason is they were made so attractive because they weren't taxed at a state level, they weren't taxed at a city level, and they're not taxed at a federal level. So they were incredibly attractive. A whole class of these were bonds issued by the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, or actually backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. And now Puerto Rico's basically in default, is unable to pay it back. And there's no question that some of the problems that were created at the insular level. I mean, there was mismanagement of money, but the reality is there's so many other elements to it that really cycle back to decisions that have been made by the U.S. government. The government established a program called Operation Bootstrap. And Operation Bootstrap was intended to do several things. One, to transition the Puerto Rican economy from an agrarian-based economy to an industrial-based economy. And the idea was also to create a strong and thriving middle class. That worked quite well between 1950 and 1980. Disposable income in Puerto Rico went up 1,600%. So it was very, very much of a success. At the same time, though, Section 936 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code allowed basically any U.S. corporation that wanted to locate to Puerto Rico the opportunity to basically operate tax-free. In 1995, President Clinton decided that there was going to be a 10-year phasing out period. And so between 1995 and 2005, basically the pharmaceutical industry almost vanished overnight. Those people that worked in those industries also left. So we've had a tremendous outflow of population. Some people have said, why don't we reenact Section 936? Or something like that. I think it would personally be a great idea because I know lots and lots of Puerto Rican professionals living in the United States that would love to return to Puerto Rico. But of course that would be a long-term process. You can't just pass a law and expect something to happen overnight. And so it's been a very complex and in many respects difficult situation. The reality is the United States at some point or another is going to have to step in. And in this election that was just held very recently, 97% of the population voted pro-statehood. And one would think, well, that's overwhelming on every level. But in terms of some of the context, only 23% of the population voted. And the reason that only 23% of the population voted is because the Populares, or the party that wants to maintain the current status, and the Independentistas, the people that want independence, boycotted the election. So the only people that voted were the pro-statehood folks, and then that's how you ended up with 97% of the population pro-statehood. I don't think that it's likely to happen, but what I can say is that statehood would create at least an established political identity for the island. Right now we are kind of in limbo. In many respects we are still very much a colony. But I think in response to how beat up the population feels, with the economy being so bad and with our political status being so much in limbo, there's a very strong emerging sense of Puerto Rican nationalism. You've got Florida being such an important swing state. There are more Puerto Ricans in Florida now than there are Cubans. And so Puerto Ricans are going to have a louder and louder voice. And all the Puerto Ricans living in Florida feel the same way, that they want to get this thing resolved. And I think that they'll use some political clout to help encourage that along. I think that the long-range outlook for Puerto Rico is a bright one. It's a beautiful island. We have a very well-educated population, and I think eventually we'll come out of this. But the next 10 to 20 years could be pretty choppy.